My name is Doris Womack, and I'm 27 years old. Sometimes I think my childhood must have been a dream, not the good kind, but the kind where you're always running and no one ever hears you scream. Growing up with my twin brother James felt like living under the same roof with two entirely different suns. His side of the house always glowed. Mine stayed in permanent twilight. From as early as I can remember, my parents called him the gifted one. He was quiet, obedient, and brilliant with numbers. The kind of child teachers wrote glowing notes about. And then there was me, loud, restless, and always outside until the streetlights came on. I loved running basketball dirt under my fingernails. They said it wasn't ladylike. Our birthdays told the story best. They called it our day, but that was a joke. James' half of the celebration took over the backyard magician's balloons, the scent of caramel popcorn in the air. Mine was a corner of the living room with a single cake from the supermarket, my name piped in icing that always seemed slightly off color. I'd get a pat on the head and a distracted smile. He'd get applause. It wasn't just the parties. It was everything. When he won a math competition, the house roared with pride. When I came home with a trophy from basketball, Mom barely looked up from folding laundry. "That's nice, Doris," she'd say, like I'd told her about the weather. Even then, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they didn't understand sports. Maybe they were just tired. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that they didn't see my worth. They didn't want to. There's one memory I can't shake. I must have been 9. It was our birthday again. I overheard my mother on the phone with her friend laughing. "Oh, James's party will be huge this year. He's so popular. Doris is happy with a small get-together. That's all she needs." Those words hit me harder than any playground insult ever could. That's all she needs. That night I sat by the window with my tiny cake, watching the lights flicker from the backyard where James's guests ran wild. For a moment, I tried to imagine what it would feel like to be loved like that, loudly, proudly, without hesitation. I wasn't unloved exactly, just unseen. There was only one person who ever made me feel like I mattered, my grandmother Martha. She'd visit once every few months, her arms always full of warmth and sweets. She'd slip a chocolate bar into my hand and whisper, "Don't let them dim your light, sweetheart." She'd look at me in a way my parents never did, like I was more than a shadow standing next to their golden boy. Whenever she came, the house's temperature seemed to change. My father would turn quieter, my mother more restrained. Grandma Martha had that kind of presence, calm but commanding. I used to wonder if she knew what was happening, if she saw how invisible I'd become. Once, when James showed her his latest report card filled with A's, she congratulated him kindly. Then she turned to me, holding the basketball medal I'd earned the same week, and smiled wider. "Both of you shine differently," she said. "Don't let the world tell you one light is brighter." That night I hid that medal under my pillow and cried into it. It was the first time someone had ever said I shined at all. Still, love from one person can't erase a lifetime of imbalance. Every small injustice piled up like tiny cuts that never got a chance to heal. James's wins became family victories. My wins were personal hobbies. He was the dream. I was the footnote. Even at school, the pattern followed us. Teachers compared us constantly. "James is such a role model," one said to me once. "You should try to be more like him." I smiled because what else could I do? But that night I stayed up late practicing my basketball shots under the dim garage light, each bounce echoing like a promise. One day I'll be more than his shadow. I started writing 2 scraps of thoughts in a cheap notebook my grandmother had given me. Little stories about girls who ran away, found hidden worlds, and finally got to be seen. I never told anyone about it. Writing was mine, the only corner of life they hadn't claimed or criticized. Years passed like that repetition, wrapped in disappointment. The favoritism was so obvious it stopped being shocking. I learned to smile at my parents' indifference and pretend it didn't hurt, but sometimes at night, when the laughter from James's room echoed through the walls, I'd whisper to myself, "He's the golden one. I'm the other one." And yet somewhere in the back of my mind, a seed had taken root, a quiet, defiant thought that refused to die. Because every time they ignored me, every time James got praise for something trivial, while my efforts went unnoticed, I felt something else grow inside me, not hate, not envy, resolve. I didn't know how or when, but I knew one day I would step out of that shadow. I would make them see me, whether they wanted to or not. That promise made in silence, whispered into the dark, would one day change everything. High school was supposed to be freedom. For me, it was a longer version of the same prison. By sophomore year, everyone I knew was already living half their lives online. Snapchat, Instagram, little group chats that pulsed all night with laughter. I wanted to be part of it, not to rebel, just to belong. But in our house, privacy was a sin, and rules were commandments carved in stone. Mom and Dad had a simple philosophy: James earns freedom. You earn rules. He had his laptop, his online games, and friends who messaged him freely. I wasn't even allowed to install a music app without asking. So when I secretly downloaded Snapchat one night after homework, it felt like inhaling after holding my breath for years. I made a small group with my track teammates. We shared memes, practiced schedules, inside jokes. Harmless fun. For once, I felt normal. That illusion shattered in a single moment. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I came home from practice, still in my track jacket, sweat drying on my skin. James was in the living room, glued to his laptop as always. I said hi. He didn't even look up. I closed my bedroom door, put on some music, and opened Snapchat. A friend had sent me a silly video of us tripping over hurdles. I laughed out loud. That was my crime. The sound must have carried through the hall because a few minutes later, the door burst open. Mom stood there, eyes cold, holding my phone in her hand. I hadn't even heard her car pull up. "What's this?" she demanded. Her voice had that sharp edge, the one that told me there was no point explaining. Still, I tried. "It's just Snapchat. Everyone at school has it. Everyone at school," she cut me off. "Do you think we raise you to be like everyone else?" She started scrolling, her expression tightening with every swipe. I could hear the tremor in her voice, not fear, but fury, disguised as disappointment. When Dad came home, the Inquisition turned into a trial. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His silence was worse. "You lied to us," he finally said, eyes fixed on the floor. "We trusted you." I wanted to scream. Trusted me. They never trusted me, but the words died in my throat. Then Mom started tearing through my room, pulling open drawers, dumping notebooks, ripping posters off the wall. "Let's see what else you're hiding," she hissed. I stood frozen. Every slam of a drawer felt like a punch. When she ran out of places to search, Dad stepped forward with quiet finality and reached for the door hinges. "Privacy is a privilege," he said flatly. The screwdriver twisted, the metal groaned. Then my door fell away from its frame with a dull thud that echoed in my chest. "If you have nothing to hide," Mom added coldly, "you don't need doors." It was surreal. I remember staring at the empty doorway, my heart hammering, while James stood behind them, pretending to look concerned. His eyes flicked to mine just long enough for me to see the smirk hiding there. That night, I lay in bed with the hallway lights spilling into my room. I could hear them talking downstairs, their voices muffled but sharp. Then James's voice rose fake and innocent. "I've seen her talking to boys online," he said. The words slid like ice down my spine. I sat up listening. Mom gasped. Dad went silent. "That's not true," I whispered to myself. But it didn't matter. In this house, truth wasn't what happened. It was what James said happened. When they came back upstairs, they didn't even ask me if it was true. Mom's face was flushed with rage. "I knew it," she snapped. "You're grounded until further notice." James leaned casually in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. I wanted to scream at him to ask why he hated me so much, but one look at his satisfied face told me everything. This wasn't about rules or Snapchat. This was about power. I spent that night staring at the blank doorway, tears drying on my cheeks, the walls closing in. My sanctuary was gone. Even my thoughts didn't feel private anymore. Somewhere between anger and despair, a thought flickered. This is the last time they'll take something from me. I didn't know what I meant by it, but it felt like a vow. A small ember of rebellion glowing quietly in the dark. Days passed, and the house carried on like nothing had happened. James joked at dinner. Mom laughed. I sat silently, pretending to eat. Dad didn't look at me once. The absence of the door made every moment feel like exposure. Every movement, every sigh was visible. Sometimes I'd catch James walking past, peeking in a cruel reminder that I had no walls left, not even around my dignity. One night, I woke up to footsteps and found him standing just beyond the threshold. "What are you doing?" I whispered. He shrugged. "Just checking if you're still awake." The way he said it made my stomach twist. "Go away, James." He smirked. "You shouldn't talk like that to the favorite child." I wanted to throw something, scream anything, but I didn't. I just turned away, clutching my pillow until dawn. By morning, I'd made myself a promise I would never let them see me break again. I stopped arguing. I stopped reacting. Outwardly, I became quiet, obedient, invisible, the daughter they always claimed. I wasn't. But inside, something was shifting. For the first time, I wasn't craving their approval. I was watching them, studying every cruelty, every lie, every blind praise. And somewhere in that quiet observation, a seed of strength began to take root. They thought they'd broken me by taking my door. They didn't realize they'd just opened another one. By the time we turned 14, the silence between James and me had curdled into something toxic. We didn't talk much anymore, not unless it was for him to twist a knife under the guise of brotherly teasing. That year, our birthday became the spark that set everything on fire. Mom had thrown another grand party for him. Balloons or rented magician tables overflowing with food. The house was alive with music and chatter. For me, she said she was too exhausted to plan anything elaborate, so I had a simple outing with friends at a nearby cafe. No decorations, no family celebration. But here's the thing, every one of James's invited guests canceled at the last minute. I don't know why. Maybe it was a scheduling mix-up, maybe karma. So while he sulked at home, I was laughing over ice cream with friends who actually showed up. When I got home that night, I could feel it, the quiet fury hanging in the air. James sat at the kitchen table, untouched cake in front of him, candles already melted down to wax puddles. He didn't say a word, but his glare said it all. That moment marked the beginning of his revenge. It started small, snide comments, subtle digs. Must be nice, Doris, having so many friends, he'd say, his voice light, but his eyes burning. Then the lies began to spread. Rumors whispered through the school halls like smoke, that I was arrogant, that I'd hit him once during an argument, that I was violent when I didn't get my way. I laughed it off, at first thinking no one would believe something so absurd. I was wrong. A week later, James showed up to school with a black eye. He claimed it was from playing football, but by lunch period, everyone had heard a different version that I had punched him. It was surreal. People I'd known for years suddenly avoided me. My best friend wouldn't even meet my eyes. Teachers watched me with that wary, quiet judgment usually reserved for kids they've given up on. When I finally confronted James after school, he didn't even pretend to be sorry. "You think you're better than me?" he said, voice low, dangerous. "Let's see how that works out when no one wants you around." I remember just staring at him speechless. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my throat tight. He leaned closer, whispering, "Because you stole my spotlight, and you liked it." That night, I sat on my bed, my doorless open bed, and cried into my hands. Not because of the rumors, but because I realized something horrifying my parents would believe him. And they did. When the principal called both of us into his office, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The room smelled like coffee and old carpet. My parents sat beside James, faces stiff with concern. The principal folded his hands and looked at me gravely. "Doris, there have been serious allegations about physical aggression toward your brother." I turned to James, expecting something. A flicker of guilt, a hint of shame, but he just looked down as if reliving the pain of a fake bruise. "That's not true," I said quickly. "He's lying. He hit himself." "Enough," Dad snapped. His voice cracked through the room like a whip. "Don't make this worse." I froze. My mother was already crying, clutching James's hand like he was the victim of a tragedy. "Why would he lie?" she asked, glaring at me. "Your brother has always been kind to you. You've been jealous since you were children." "Jealous?" The word came out like a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "You think I'm jealous of this?" I gestured toward James, who flinched for effect. The principal sighed weary. "Doris, we have to take bullying accusations seriously. You'll be suspended for 10 days. It felt like the world tilted. "No, please," I tried to protest, tears streaming down my face. "You don't understand. He made it up." But they weren't listening. No one ever listened. James sat there playing the perfect victim, biting his lip, just enough to look brave. My father's face was set in cold disappointment. My mother refused to even meet my eyes. I left the office that day, not as Doris Womack, student, athlete, aspiring writer, but as that girl who hit her brother. The moment we got home, my dad started packing my clothes into a suitcase. "Dad, what are you doing?" "You can't stay here," he said without looking at me. "Not after what you did." What I did, I was shaking. I didn't do anything. "You believe him over me." He zipped the bag with finality. "Your grandmother will take you in. Maybe she can knock some sense into you." I dropped to my knees, gripping his arm. "Please, just listen." "Enough," his shout made me flinch. "I will not have a bully under my roof." James stood in the doorway, watching it all unfold with that same eerie calm. When our eyes met, he smiled a tiny, victorious smile that made my blood run cold. That was the last time I ever begged for their understanding. Mom called Grandma Martha, who arrived within the hour. her expression unreadable as she helped me gather what little dignity I had left. Once we stepped outside, she told me to wait by the car. Then she went back to face them. Through the window, I saw her standing tall in their doorway, voice raised like thunder. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught fragments. Heartless child abuse police. When she came back, she said quietly, "They won't be calling you again." I didn't ask what she'd said. I didn't need to. That night at Grandma's house, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling. The air smelled like lavender and rain. For the first time in years, I felt safe, but the safety came wrapped in grief. Everything I'd known, my home, my parents, my brother, had turned to ash. But lying there with Grandma's soft snoring echoing from the next room, I felt something else too: relief. Because I realized that being unwanted wasn't the worst thing in the world. Being used was. And James's lies had freed me from both. The first morning I woke up at Grandma Martha's house, the world felt strangely quiet. No banging on my door, no rules shouted down the hallway, no James. Just the smell of buttered toast and rain against the kitchen window. She had already laid out breakfast by the time I came down: eggs, tea, and a single white rose in a jar. Her way of saying you're safe now without needing words. I didn't speak much those first few days. My body was there, but my mind was still replaying every moment: the principal's stare, my father's anger, James's smirk. It was like trying to scrub off a stain that wouldn't fade. Grandma didn't push. She'd sit beside me while we watched her favorite gardening shows occasionally, slipping in small truths between commercials. You know, she said once, her tone light: people like your parents mistake control for love. They can't tell the difference. I remember asking softly, "Then what's love?" She smiled, eyes glimmering. "Freedom. To be who you are and still be welcome at the table." Those words stuck to me like honey. When school resumed, after my suspension, Grandma insisted on walking me there herself. My parents hadn't even called to ask where I'd been. At school, whispers still followed me like shadows, but I forced myself to hold my head high. I didn't respond to the gossip. I didn't fight. I just endured. It wasn't easy. Some days I'd eat lunch in the bathroom just to avoid the stares. Other days I'd come home and collapse into Grandma's arms, sobbing until my throat burned. But little by little, she taught me how to rebuild. She made me join her at the community library every Saturday. At first it was just to get me out of the house, but soon it became something more. Surrounded by books, by quiet voices, and stories that weren't mine, I started to remember who I was before they'd made me feel small. That's where I found my voice again, through writing. I began journaling every night, first as a form of therapy, then as something else entirely. Words became my refuge, a way to organize the chaos inside me. I wrote about my life, but I disguised it as fiction stories about girls trapped in houses without doors, brothers who lied for love, and grandmothers who guarded them like angels with tired hands. By the time I graduated high school, my reputation had faded into something neutral. People forgot the rumors, or maybe they just didn't care anymore. But I did, and I remembered everything. When it came time for college, Grandma helped me fill out applications. She didn't have much money, but she made sure I applied for scholarships. "You earned your way out," she said. "Don't ever feel like you owe anyone your wings." I got accepted to a university 3 hours away. It wasn't prestigious, but it was mine, a place where no one knew me as the liar's sister. The day I left, Grandma hugged me so tight I could feel her heartbeat against mine. "Write your truth," she whispered. "One day it'll set you free." College was the first time I tasted freedom. Real freedom. I could close my door and lock it, eat cereal for dinner, stay up till sunrise. No one was checking my phone or asking who I was texting. But it wasn't all joy. The first semester, I kept waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for my parents to apologize, waiting for James to admit what he did. The silence was louder than any insult they'd ever thrown. So I filled it with work. I joined the campus paper, stayed late editing articles, and took up freelance writing jobs online. At first, it was just pocket money, product descriptions, blog posts, even ghostwriting for other students. But soon my clients started coming back, recommending me to others. Every small win felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I stopped introducing myself as James's sister. I stopped explaining my past altogether. In this new world, I was just Doris, a girl who wrote well and met her deadlines. Sometimes, though, at night I'd scroll through social media and see pictures of families celebrating holidays together. And for a fleeting second, I'd feel that familiar ache, the longing to be wanted even by those who never deserved me. Whenever that ache got too loud, I'd call Grandma. She'd always pick up on the second ring. How's my shining star, she'd say. And suddenly the ache would quiet. Years rolled by, like pages turning in a book. By the time I was 24, writing had become more than a hobby. It was my livelihood. I had clients from different countries, a steady income, and even a modest following online. My professors started inviting me to give short talks about freelance work. I'd stand before a room of students and smile, pretending I wasn't still that girl who'd once been called a bully by her own family. One day, while cleaning out my dorm room before graduation, I found something in the back of my drawer, the old doorknob from my childhood room. I had kept it all these years without realizing why. I held it in my palm, the metal cool and heavy, and I finally understood. It wasn't just a reminder of what was taken from me. It was proof that I had survived it. After graduation, I moved into a small apartment overlooking the city. The first thing I did was install a beautiful, solid oak door with a lock that only I had the key to. Some nights, when the city lights flickered outside my window, I'd look at that door and whisper to myself, "This time, no one can take it away." I was finally free, or so I thought. Because freedom doesn't erase the past, it only waits for it to catch up, and mine was already on its way. By 27, my life had become something I never thought it could be, quiet, fulfilled mine. After years of clawing my way through freelance work, late nights, and self-doubt, I'd built a career that actually made sense. Companies reached out to me instead of the other way around. My words traveled across websites, ads, and campaigns. I was even featured on a few small online magazines talking about turning pain into productivity. It felt strange to be recognized for a life I had built from the wreckage of the one my family destroyed. But no success ever felt as good as sitting across from Grandma Martha on a Sunday afternoon sharing tea and laughter. Her hair had turned whiter, her steps slower, but her eyes were as fierce as ever. She still tended her rose bushes every morning, one for each year she'd raised me. One afternoon I helped her repot a dying fern, and she said, "You've done well, Doris. You've built a life from ashes." I smiled, but something in her tone told me she knew there was still a shadow I hadn't faced. She was right. Even though I had moved on, there were nights when I'd wake up sweating from dreams of my father's voice, my mother's tears, and James's smirk. Those ghosts lingered like background noise in an otherwise perfect song. Then came the day that noise turned into a knock. It happened a few weeks after my television appearance. A local morning show had invited me to talk about digital writing and creative independence. I was nervous, but the interview went well. Clips of it were shared online, and my following suddenly grew overnight. When I got home that evening, my phone was lighting up messages from colleagues, clients, and distant relatives congratulating me. It felt good in a simple, validating way. Then I saw its 6 missed calls from Mom. I froze. The name alone sent a pulse through my chest. It had been nearly a decade since I'd heard her voice. For a few hours, I didn't call back. I just stared at the screen, wondering if it was a mistake. But curiosity, or maybe that buried child in me still craving recognition, won out. I called her. She answered on the first ring voice, trembling with practice warmth. "Doris, I just saw you on TV. You looked so beautiful." The words hit me like static, polite, distant, and dripping with nostalgia. "Thanks," I said cautiously. "How did you even find the show?" "Oh, one of your aunts sent it to me. We're all so proud of you." Behind her, I heard my father's voice, older, deeper. "Tell her we said congratulations." For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine that this was what it sounded like when families healed. Then came the question. So she said lightly, "You must be doing very well financially, And there it was, the mask slipping. I said nothing, but she continued. "Your father and I have been struggling a bit. Retirement isn't easy, you know. The roof's leaking and we wanted to renovate the house. It's hard to admit, but we thought maybe you could help." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You're asking me for money." "Don't say it like that," she said, her tone tightening. "We're family. You're successful now. It's only right that you help your parents when they need it." Parents. The word felt foreign. I wanted to hang up, but I didn't. I wanted to hear how far they'd go. "Where's James?" I asked. "He's still living there." She hesitated. "He's between jobs. He's been through a tough time." Of course he had. The golden boy had faded. "And now," I said slowly, "you're calling the one you kicked out to save him." Her sigh was sharp. "Don't be cruel, Doris. That was years ago. You were children." "No," I said quietly. He was the child. I was the scapegoat. The silence on the line stretched brittle as glass. Then my father's voice broke through, steady but commanding. "Doris, this attitude doesn't suit you. We gave you life. The least you can do is show gratitude by helping your family in their time of need. I laughed again, this time cold, hollow. You gave me life. Then you took it back the day you threw me out. He didn't like that. His voice hardened. Don't talk to me like that, young lady. We're your parents. You owe us respect. That word respect tasted like rust. You want my help, I said. Fine, but it comes with one condition. Mom's voice softened. What condition? You tell everyone, every aunt, every cousin, every family friend the truth. You admit that James lied. You admit that you kicked me out for something I didn't do. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. My father barked a short laugh. You can't be serious. I am. You want me to rebuild your home, then rebuild my name first. Doris' mom whispered, that's unnecessary. We can handle this privately. Privately, I repeated. You humiliated me publicly. You believed lies that destroyed my life. You can't rewrite history behind closed doors. Her voice trembled. You've become so cold. No, I said evenly. I've become clear. My father lost his composure then. Enough of this nonsense. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. You should be ashamed of how you're talking to us. I felt my heartbeat slow, a strange calm spreading through me. You didn't raise me, I said. Grandma did. You abandoned me, remember? For a moment, there was only the faint sound of my mother's breathing. Then my father muttered something under his breath. I caught the word ungrateful, and the call ended. I stared at my phone screen until it went black. My reflection stared back older, sharper, no longer the girl who begged for love. Part of me expected to feel guilty, but instead I felt lighter, like I had finally slammed shut a door that should have been locked years ago. That night, Grandma found me on the porch staring out into the dark. They called you, didn't they? She asked. I nodded. What did they want? Money. She snorted softly. Figures. I hesitated. I gave them a condition. Her eyebrow arched. And what was that? I told her. About the truth. The confession. The demand they'd never meet. She smiled, then slow approving. Good, she said. You didn't ask for revenge. You asked for accountability. There's a difference. I leaned my head on her shoulder, the night air cool around us. Somewhere inside, a younger version of me finally exhaled. But peace has a way of never lasting long. Because 3 days later, James sent me a message, and everything I thought I'd buried came roaring back to life. James's message arrived late at night, right as I was finishing an article about emotional resilience. Ironic, really. The notification blinked on my screen, his name appearing like a ghost from a nightmare I'd long outgrown. James. Hey sis, long time no see. I heard Mom and Dad called you. That little stunt you pulled, giving them an impossible ultimatum, classic Doris. They'll never do it, you know. They never loved you enough to risk embarrassing me. I admit, yeah, I lied about you. But that was 15 years ago. Move on. Stop being selfish and bitter. You're unmarried, childless, and clearly have nothing better to do than hold grudges. Be a better daughter. Help them. My hands went cold. I read it again and again, each word digging into me like glass. The casual cruelty, the arrogance, the utter lack of remorse. For a moment, I just sat there frozen, watching the cursor blink beneath his words. Then something inside me cracked, but not in the way it used to. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just went still. Because in that stillness, something terrifyingly calm began to form a plan. I opened a blank email. The subject line read, "The truth you were never told." I began to write. I told the story exactly as it had happened. Not the polished version, not the softened one I'd told strangers in motivational talks. This time I wrote the truth raw, how my parents favored James, how their love had always been conditional, how they stripped me of privacy, dignity, and home over a lie. I described how James had bruised himself and blamed me, how they'd thrown me out without a shred of hesitation, how Grandma Martha had saved me. And then I attached the screenshot, James's message, his smug confession glowing in digital ink. At the end, I wrote, "You believed a liar and destroyed a child. I'm not writing this for revenge. I'm writing it because silence protected all of you and poisoned me. I'm done being quiet." Then I took a deep breath and hit send. To everyone, my extended family, old family friends, even a few mutual acquaintances from our hometown. For a moment, everything went still. The only sound in my apartment was the hum of the refrigerator. Then the replies began to pour in. Some were shocked, some furious, some apologetic. My aunt called me sobbing. "Doris, I had no idea. We thought your parents were saints," my cousin texted. "We always wondered what really happened. You didn't deserve that." And then inevitably came the silence from my parents. A silence that didn't feel empty this time, it felt cornered. By morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls and messages, most from numbers I didn't recognize. But three stood out: my mother, my father, and James. I didn't open them. I forwarded everything straight to my lawyer, who drafted a cease and desist letter, warning them that further contact would be considered harassment. That was the day the noise stopped. A week later, I drove to Grandma's house. She was on the porch watering her roses. When she saw me, she didn't ask what happened. She already knew. I sat beside her, and for a long time we just listened to the birds. Finally, she said softly, "You look lighter." I told the truth, I said, out loud this time. She smiled, eyes glinting. Truth has a way of doing that. Burns everything down, but it leaves the air clean. We spent that week together cooking, watching old movies, and tending her garden. I helped her plant new rose bushes, pink ones this time. As we dug into the soil, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small cold piece of metal I'd carried for years, the doorknob from my childhood room. "What's that?" she asked. I looked at it for a long moment before setting it gently into the dirt. "A reminder," I said, "that I don't need to hold on to locked doors anymore." We covered it with soil, pressing it flat, and planted a seedling above it. When the last bit of earth was smoothed over, Grandma took my hand. "You've built a good life, Doris, and you did it without becoming them. That's all that matters." I nodded, tears finally spilling down my cheeks, not the tears of a wounded child, but of someone finally free. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I checked my email one last time. There was a flood of support messages, strangers who'd read my story after it began circulating online. Writers, students, even parents thanking me for speaking up. One message stood out. It was from a teenage girl who wrote, "I showed your story to my mom. She apologized for how she treats me compared to my brother. You don't know me, but you changed something in our house." I closed my laptop and smiled. For the first time, I realized I hadn't just told my story. I had rewritten its ending. That night, sitting on Grandma's porch, the stars clear above us, she asked, "Do you forgive them?" I thought about it for a long time. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I forgive myself for trying to earn their love." She squeezed my hand. "That's enough." We sat there in silence, not the painful kind, but the peaceful kind. The kind that means the storm has passed. And as the crickets sang and the garden rustled softly in the wind, I finally let out a small laugh. Not bitter, not broken, just free. For years, I was the invisible twin. Now I don't need to be seen. I just need to be free.